Aloha and welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson, where I have out of this world conversations with extraordinary people. Today, I am excited to have on Erica VanEaton, and we're going to bring her on in just a moment. But first, a couple of announcements. If you have not had the opportunity to grab my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you do that at mysticmanta.com or drlisajthompson.com. If you're coming to Hawaii at any time, specifically to the Big Island, then come on one of my Big Island UFO tours where you will see the night sky in a whole new way using my advanced Generation 3 military night vision goggles. For more information on that, you can go to bigislandufotours.com. And I have date changes now for my Galactic Ascension Channel certification program. It's now going to be February 22nd and 23rd of next year. And my Galactic Retreat, which was going to be held this fall, is now going to be next spring, April 30th to May 4th. So please come and see me on those. And without further ado, we're going to bring Erica on. Hi, Erica.
Hi, I'm excited to play with you today.
Yes, me too. So let me share with the audience your bio, and then we'll just jump into the conversation. So Erica VanEaton is a quantum alchemist intuitive that helps others reimagine their internal knowingness. She teaches others how to reweave their foundational structure to curate new realities and expand their gifts. Her oldest son, that was born with Down Syndrome and Autism, guided her through restructuring their own energy matrices to become a new kind of human. Through reimagining the roles of the human vessel, she learned how to create an internal unified way of playing in the quantum field. By playing with science and metaphysics, she not only helps others heal and expand, she empowers them to do the same. Well, I'm super excited to talk to you about all of this. Really happy to have you on. I would first love, because this is our first time meeting, I would love for you to share with me and our audience your background, like kind of how did you grow up, spiritual, religious, something else, so that we understand how you got into this kind of quantum healing work.
I grew up in a Catholic environment,
Okay.
but I grew up questioning things. I had a dad that was pretty open, and we talked philosophy sometimes, and that was pretty beneficial because I grew up in a small town that was very religious. But I had mystical experiences growing up that helped keep me open as well. But it really wasn't until the birth of my oldest son 16 years ago, if you're listening to this in 2024, that was born with Down syndrome, that really helped guide me down the spiritual path, really because I had no choice.
Yeah. So, well, before he was born, what kind of work were you doing?
I was a cardiac sonographer in a hospital. Well, I worked for several hospitals. It was a unit. And I was working in, we have to go to codes where people are actively dying or surgery in, pretty high intense situations. And I had mystical experiences there as well. Like I could tell when a soul was leaving the body and wasn't going to come back home to the body, but rather leave, and experiences with dark entities and things. And so I kind of have a different perspective of them. So, and it was all through feeling. I was highly clairsentient. I could feel everything. And then I could hear ringing in my ears, but it wasn't as though I understood anything of what was going on. I just intuitively knew things without understanding how I knew them.
Okay. So I'm curious a little bit more about how that showed up, of the feeling of the soul leaving the body. What did that feel like?
It was freedom and a knowingness.
Okay.
And, whether physicians and nurses want to talk about it or not, everyone in the room knew when the soul was gone. There was a moment of just, even if the code was still active, meaning they were still pumping on the chest, they were still trying to resuscitate, there was a moment when you could look up and you could look at the faces and everyone knew that they were gone. Yeah. And it wasn't, if it was a younger child, of course that's mixed with more grief, but there was also a moment of peace before the emotions hit, before the thinking mind came into play and started to judge what was occurring. There was a moment of, almost silence when everyone could feel that space.
Okay. Well, and not that I normally don't go down a rabbit hole of like dark entities, but I am a little curious about what you were experiencing with that in this situation.
So really, they gave me a lot of headaches because their vibration was so heavy and just kind of hard. I got a lot of headaches from them, but it wasn't like they were trying to attack me. They just were there to do a job, and it's it's like a knowingness about that as well. Like, I didn't understand attachments. I just knew that there was energy that was heavy in a room. One of my most profound experiences before I woke up was I was walking into a patient's room that was about my age. I think I was around 27 at the time. And she had tried to commit suicide. And I was just thinking about those kinds of things. And when I walked into the room, I felt what she felt. It was this immediate black hole, emptiness, no way out kind of feeling.
Mhm.
And I had to leave the room for a moment. And I was like, wait, that's not mine. I said, thank you for showing me, but this is not mine. I don't know how I knew how to say that, but I did. And then I was able to go back in and perform the test, but also I was able to connect with her in a way and have compassion and empathy for and a new understanding for what she was feeling and experiencing that I hadn't before. And I know that there were at least 3 attachments in the room, but they weren't trying to harm me. They were just trying to show me where at in myself that there might have been a vibrational match to what she was experiencing.
Okay. Now, I had no idea you were going to bring that kind of thing up.
I
And
didn't either.
we're, and we're gonna take a little twist here,
Mhm.
if you don't mind, because so my husband committed suicide last year, and there I have several psychic medium friends that were feeling like there was maybe some dark energy attached to him, that was
Mhm.
part of, what caused him to spiral out of control, because it was completely out of the blue. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious, like, for the situation that you experienced with that patient, were they the darkness of the energy, was that really what was maybe causing those thoughts for her? Or can you, from your perspective, can you explain that a little more?
From my perspective, I look at things from a multidimensional perspective. What I understood then was pretty limited, but what I understand now is different. So if I expand my energy and go out and out and out, and I'm looking at, these situations now from a different perspective, because, with my kids and everything, we've been through the ringer with all different kinds of energy. So it they're here to do a job.
Mm-hmm.
They're here to reflect where we need to heal. And either we are able to dive into that healing and release that, or we don't. And sometimes we get consumed. Like, I could feel that black hole that she was consumed with. And the only thing I could offer her was, I see you. I'm here with you. But it's her journey to move through it or not. And I have to respect the soul's journey. That's what we're here to explore. How far and wide can we take this soul journey? So from if a person chooses, and it's always a choice, I know it doesn't seem like it because emotions are so powerful, especially negative emotions. They're so consuming. And the reason why they're so consuming is because they wrap your thoughts and the chemicals so tightly around the body, it feels like you're getting squeezed, and it speaks so loudly. Pain is so much louder than joy. So it feels like you're crushing in and there's no way out. But if we can breathe deeply and move through it and choose to honor it and actually bring it even closer into the body and just observe it, then we actually can transform it. So my understanding now is completely different than what I understood then.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So now let's move to the birth of your son.
Mhm.
And so that's your first child that
Yep.
now you have this baby with Down syndrome, and did they know right away autism, or was that later?
No, we later figured that out when he was in school. And we didn't know he had Down syndrome until he was born. And even though my husband and I both worked in the medical field and thought we should have a heads up on things, it was the greatest gift that he could have given us to not know, because then we didn't have an expectation of who he couldn't be. So when he was born, my husband brought him over to me, and my husband didn't yet know. I knew immediately because I had just scanned a beautiful little girl in the NICU with Down syndrome 2 weeks prior. And the way that her eyes followed her mom, I was just mesmerized, because she was the most aware baby that I'd ever been around. And when my husband brought my son over to me, it was the same thing. I said his name and he turned his eyes and he looked at me directly in the eyes. And it was the first time I heard my soul. And I heard my soul say, "You know him and he knows you too." And it was so clear and so strong. I had such a peace come over me before the emotions and the shock of the diagnosis set in, that underneath the grief that was going to come, which did, there was an underlying sense of knowingness that this is the way it was supposed to be. So that was my introduction to a deeper spiritual connection. But it really wasn't until he started school and we lost our connection, and I was headed towards depression and some pretty dark emotions, that I started deep breathing. And when I started deep breathing, then I was able to consciously begin to connect with his soul and download new understandings.
Okay. Well, and before we got on, I had asked you about any kind of galactic experiences or whatever. And so how did you start experiencing that with your son?
So as I was going through awakening process, and I was kind of catapulted into it, in the first 3-4 years, he was pretty easy on me. But then when I started actually really making a conscious effort to connect and things, every night I was getting woken up by, I've always heard sounds, but I couldn't place them. I didn't understand them. And the Pleiadians were starting to come in. And I felt them same place every night. They were working on my crown, attuning my crown to be able to download different kinds of information. So they were coming in, and that was my introduction to aliens. They just popped in and said, "Hello, here we are. We're going to do this."
Did they actually announce themselves as Pleiadians, or how did you determine that that's who they were?
I just knew.
Okay.
It's I was always claircognizant. Most of us are. We just know things, but we doubt it and we don't understand it. It's just something that I knew. And so then I started doing research, and sometimes I would have blue energy show up. My personal connection was more with the archangels than it was with the star beings. I was more attuned to them. So it took me a little bit to attune to Pleiadian, although it's not that their frequency is that much different, but one's in the 5th more and one's more in the 6th. So just everything is an attunement when we look at our energy fields, whether we're dealing with any kind of ascended masters, archangels, or any kind of light beings or animals. Even everything is a frequency, and we are needing to lighten up and get our frequency matched so we can understand and tune in to that multidimensional aspect of self that is us, that is them in that dimensional field.
Yes, beautiful. Well, so then you tell me more about the downloads and all the what was going on with the Pleiadians, with your son, and all of that, as you're awakening up now.
Well, the questions I started to ask were, originally I wanted to heal him. I wanted him to heal, him to shift. And that was such a limited small. I knew immediately that only lasted a month. And I was like, okay, I have to reshift. So my questions began, okay, how are we supposed to embody? How do I need to embody differently so that he can be more fully in his body? Because those with autism, Down syndrome, they're on a very high spectrum of light when their soul tries to enter the body. And because their spectrum is so fast and they
Mm-hmm.
carry so many different rays of light, they don't really fit down through our chakra system very well because our chakra system, the lower three chakras, have been too slow. So when they come down, one of the first things he showed me was that he spiraled down and he came in crooked. So he couldn't really attach into those deep emotions and process them because his spirit wasn't in those lower chakras.
Mm-hmm.
So he was having me process those for him and lighten that up. And as I lightened up, then his lightened up and then his spirit could come down. So it was these kind of questions that I would start to begin to understand as the downloads were coming in, because I opened the door to ask the questions that needed to be asked. The curious nature of, I know nothing. Every day still I wake up, I know nothing. What do I need to understand differently? So they worked me through the upgrading the lower three chakras. And that's where most of our work is always at. Because if we expand and upgrade those lower chakras and get them spinning faster, we begin to self consume our own energy and we begin to become like a vacuum for our own energy. And if we do that, we are telling our bodies and our minds and our egos that we love and trust this human container. And if I do that, then that's going to open up my other upper chakras naturally without me trying so hard. So first working through that, and then I began to ask direct questions about the human container as far as what was the original intention of the ego, because his ego was very, very quiet, which was beautiful because he didn't create a story, but it was not beneficial for him depending on what room we were in. Because if we walked into an environment where people were projecting their energy really strongly because they just weren't aware, they were
Mm-hmm.
controlling or had strong opinions or very emotional, his energy, like he would literally collapse in and he wouldn't be able to communicate or function. His function level would go way down. And that's actually what caused me to start asking questions in the first place. And that's when I was headed towards depression, because we lost our connection when he started school, because she held a low vibrational standard of who he was based off of his diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So he collapsed in and became that. So my question was, okay, one of the first things that Mother Mary had shift through my head when he was born. Again, I wasn't awake yet. Like these things would just come in, and she said he's not filtering through an ego. And I was understanding that. So then I was like, okay, well, we need to reroute. Something needs to shift because he needs a definite boundary of who he is and who he's not. Our ego gives us that. What was the original intention of the ego? So then the Pleiadians came in and downloaded a lot through light language and transcribing the light language. It's kind of one thing that I do, of showing me that an ego is really this beautiful part of our soul, is meant to work and can work from a place of compassion rather than fear. The ego that we know is from a very low dimensional space and plane and a fear base. So they were having me tune into the higher astral aspect of my ego and learn how to bring that forward to work with it differently. And when I did that and introduced my ego back to my soul and began to understand that we were meant to work as one and not trying to resist or kill my ego, I
Yeah.
just needed to know its role differently. Then that began to give him a beautiful barrier, because as I shifted mine, then his came and fell into place too. And then we could start going into different environments where he wasn't so affected and he could stay grounded and he could stay, true to himself and stay expanded. So it's these little things all along our path. So it's hard to pinpoint one thing that they downloaded.
Right.
It's been a rescripting and a rewiring of what is human, what is being human, and what does internal unity consciousness look like. And if we can get to that place and inviting these human aspects in and merging them back with our soul so that we come back into a divine alignment, then we can step into unity consciousness as a
Mhm.
collective. But that doesn't mean that we become absorbed. It means we become even more sovereign with consuming our own energy and releasing codependencies on these external programs, people, places, and things, truly honoring the soul path and journey that everyone is on.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's actually what my different higher dimensional ET groups share through me as well. So I love that. And I mean, okay, so what a beautiful gift that an agreement that you and your son came to have for this life. Because I know that mainstream society, there's such a stigma around, Down syndrome and autism, and so many people wanting to blame autism on, vaccines or other things. But from your understanding, can you share a little more in the perspective of what you've discovered with each of those independent diagnoses? Because you did a beautiful job, but I
Yeah.
can go a little bit deeper into that so that people can maybe understand that, it is an agreement. It's not like we need to put blame on anything, right?
Right. Really, they're here to hold a higher dimensional plane for us. So they vibrate much quicker, but they're also showing us where we've disconnected from from Earth and our food sources because they're so sensitive to it. Because they don't produce the same kind of chemicals, their methylation processes are different. Their grounding techniques have to be different because the soils affect them differently. They need more of it, but they're showing us where we've disconnected from each other, from ourselves, and from the earth. And they can do so because they carry such vast arrays of consciousness. So most of us come in on just a few different rays of light. As a soul, a part of our soul or spirit goes down on a white ray of light. We go through a beautiful pyramid, so to speak, crystal, which takes that ray of light and it spans it out into the full spectrum. So most of us come down on a few different rays of light, embodying what we want to accomplish or experience in this lifetime, because each ray of light carries a different set of frequencies, which relate to different like soul paths and things. They're coming down on the entire spectrum of light, and then another entire spectrum of light beyond that, beyond that, beyond that. So they're holding, more of their multi-dimensional selves within the one being. Whereas when we come down, we often collapse into the third dimension. And so most of our awareness is in the third dimension. So we're all multi-dimensional beings. We're
Yeah.
residing in so many different dimensions. But where most of our attention is where our energy is, where our focus is.
Mhm.
But they come down very, very expanded, fully aware that they're multidimensional. And so a lot of times their perspectives are hard to understand for those of us that are caught more in the third dimension, because most of their energy at any point in time could be in the fifth or the sixth dimension, and they're looking at it from that perspective and they're like, why are you worrying about this? Like, this doesn't make any sense. This means nothing to me. I'm going to ignore that you're telling me this because this is inconsequential. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're seeing it from a completely different perspective. So they're helping us shift where our energy is at. So they're helping us learn how to look through a sphere instead of looking through like a piece of paper. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Yeah. And I hope it does for the audience. No, thank you for that description.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so then as you're progressing along, understanding your son more and more and getting these downloads, then how did you actually get into doing this work, I guess, with other people?
And it continually shifts and changes.
As does mine.
Yeah.
The work I do.
Originally, he was helping me do healings. He wanted to help other people heal. One transformational thing that really catapulted things was we had just moved to Texas from Kansas, and it was a download that was very clear that we had to move. He needed to be close to the ocean. Well, all three of my kids did, for the negative ions coming off the ocean. You live by the water, you understand this, to
Yeah.
really help crystallize and keep his crystallized body in place and intact and help it flourish. He just needed the water. So we moved down there, and I had gotten invited to a pool party with the kids. And so I took them, and within 30 minutes of being there, he completely shut down and he couldn't talk. And he was like drooling down the side of his face. And I was like, oh my God, we got to go. So I packed up the kids and I got in the car. And as soon as we got in the car, everything shifted. He started talking again. His facial features shifted. And so that night in meditation, um, I asked for his soul to come forward to be with me. And he said, this is a reminder of how much other people's energy can affect me. And I'm ready to help people heal. So
Mm.
that was I was like, okay, I guess I have to out myself and we have to do this. And so from the beginning, what I thought I was going to be primarily working with parents who have children with autism or nonverbal and teaching them how to speak more telepathically or helping their children come more fully into their bodies. But really, it was they don't want to heal yet. They're not really ready to heal until the rest of humanity steps up and does what we need to do. So it was really, I learned a lot from them, and it shifted my focus to just the general population of teaching internal unity consciousness, self empowerment techniques of self consumption, coming home to the body, learning how to regulate and consume your own energy so that your gifts naturally begin to open. The self empowerment and the source energy codes that you have can expand. So every soul has a certain set of source energy codes that they were derived from source from. And
Mhm.
we came here to expand those codes of energy through all the different experiences. But they're just like DNA. And if we're allowing someone else's energy to dictate who we are and how we be in the world through programming, whether that's conscious or subconscious, then our source energy codes literally like shrivel up and shut down. And that's not what we came here to do. So my my whole being, my whole work is helping people unlock, decode, and begin to stretch back out, so to speak.
Okay. So, is this something that happens in one session or is it multiple sessions? How do you work actually with the clients? And like who's your ideal kind of client that would come to you?
I have all different sorts of clients.
Okay.
I work with a lot of healers or coaches that are wanting to expand, find their own gifts, because so many people go into healing modalities that aren't their own. And
Right.
we can learn from beautiful healing modalities, but it's really about, well, how does source work through you? How do you how do your gifts work with someone else? And that's part of the gift that I've been given and I had to have in order to allow my oldest son to do what he wanted to do, was be able to learn and observe and then amplify how energy comes through someone's body and reflect that back to them so they can begin to understand how they operate, and it feels really empowering, and then they go out and they expand other people. So my optimal clients are the people that are ready to really embody and empower themselves and then share that out with the world, doing the same thing and taking that forward.
Okay. Beautiful. So, what are, can you give a couple of examples of people that you've been able to help with the healing work that you do, like transformations that have happened?
There's such a wide variety. Like on a personal family setting, last year I worked with a woman who first came to me because her 19-year-old son had pretty severe autism and he was in a really dark place. And the first thing I told her when we got on, and it was a 3-month container at first. And when we first got on, I said, I just knew, I was like, he's going to be living on his own. He's going to be okay. But we have to rewrite the stories. And so
Yeah.
within that 3-month time, he had just got admitted to a mental facility when we started working together. We rewrote the stories and got him back in his body and detached, unmeshed him from her to give
Hmm.
him space to feel himself again, to be home in his body. And she began to rescript how she saw and knew him. And he was out, got his own apartment, able to live on his own by the time we were done. And then she started her own healing practice. So there's examples like that where it's like, okay, we're actually moving a lot of information and energy forward. And then I have, it's all confidential. So clients that are healers that were wanting to really understand and expand their business, but they were trying to do it off of other people's models or other people's modalities, and they weren't quite getting the results they wanted because they weren't in their own body. So like one coaching client that's a coach, it's like, okay, let's just shift this. What is it? How does energy want to work through you differently? So
Hmm.
within a few weeks, we shifted that. And I was like, this is how it needs to be. I said, I'm channeling the soul. So it's not me saying it.
Yeah.
So we're like reworking things. And then in 3 weeks, she sold, a $3,000 package that she didn't even have listed. Someone came and asked her for. So that's how things begin to shift and change when we embody our own gifts and promote those through us, for us, but from a place of foundational stability. So we have to rewrite our foundational codes.
Okay. So what else would you want people here to know about the work that you do?
I want to play. So my work is all about play. My kids remind me of play
Mm,
all the time, and that we need to just relax into it, that there aren't any wrong choices or wrong roads. Everything leads back home to source.
mhm.
Every decision you've ever made, every person that you've ever had leads back home to source because it leads back home to you, and you are source. So letting go of the notion that maybe you could have done things differently or better in the past, because none of that means anything. Every decision you've ever made, if you allow yourself to release the emotion from it, there's only wisdom that remains. And then you have gratitude, and then you've expanded into more of yourself. So there's no wrong decisions, and that whatever kind of healing or coaching or whatever you want to do, come at it from a space of play, because with that play energy, it brings that childlike creativity
Mhm.
in, and that allows you to open your third eye. That allows you to come up with new brilliant ideas that only you can come up with. That allows you to use your voice in only the way that you can speak it. So my whole thing is come
Yeah,
home to yourself.
beautiful. Well, and that's again my right in line with what I channel with my higher dimensional ETs. So
Yeah.
yeah. So now, how have your other boys done with their brother, their older brother? Like,
Amazing.
okay, like, are they understanding things from that quantum realm?
They do naturally.
Mm-hmm.
With him being the oldest, they didn't know any different because they were born with him. My middle son is 22 months younger than him, and he came in speaking telepathically to my oldest son. Like there wasn't any question about how he needed to be from him. They've also learned, the younger two, like if normal kids fight, that's what they're going to go through stages where they bicker or whatever, but
Yeah.
they've really learned that they can't have those explosive feelings and continue on with them very long, because it directly affects the oldest brother, and he will come unglued if they don't move through something. Everyone's going to feel everything all the time, and we don't ever want to deny someone experiencing anger or anything like that, but holding on to it and keeping at it, that's what doesn't work in our house, because our oldest just can't handle it. So they've learned a lot about not how to cover over, but how
Mhm.
to process.
That's beautiful. And if more people could learn that at that younger age, right, we would
Yes.
have a
Yes.
lot easier time, here getting along on earth and getting over that judgment of what people are experiencing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so in our last bit of time, any words of wisdom or anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
I think it can be intimidating when you hear someone like you talk or like me talk, thinking we're so far advanced that they could never be like us. But in reality, you're just as powerful, just
Yeah.
as important, just as expansive as we are. So I just genuinely feel gratitude for having me on, and having any ears that are listening that actually feel that sense of, can come home and feel that sense of.
Oh, Beautiful. And Erica, I think I've lost you, the connection. So we'll see if she comes back on. Her video is buffering, it looks like, but okay. Well, so that was Erica VanEaton, and what a beautiful soul, beautiful work that she does. So if any of you are compelled to work with her, you have family with Down syndrome or autism and want to understand that at a deeper level, definitely reach out to her. I will. Anyway, thank you all for being here on Connection to the Cosmos, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.